Hi guys, great to meet you. And yeah, I think the sort of especially the F apps are the part that every tech company is going through, and they rarely talk about. And I think it's something that we believe being a tech company ourselves is sort of two steps forward, one step backward, and it's very much an important part to kind of like keep things fresh and kind of like mistakes or finding things that doesn't work is part of the process. But why don't we start with a brief introduction? So I'm Pavel. I'm the CEO of Tech3 and also the founder of the business. And what we're looking to build is a platform where engineers can learn from each other, can build strong network, and uh, help each other to level up their careers. We'll also get rewarded by doing so. And we're working primarily with VC-backed businesses who are growing fast. They're very hungry for talent, but they're also working on challenges that no one else have solved. And I think that's what makes these companies very, very exciting. I think the goal of the call for us is that people or the audience, whether they are engineers, whether they are founders, whether they are CTOs, can learn from your experiences and get a look under the hood of how the businesses that you're part of were growing, and listen to things that never get the spotlight, right? Because usually if you read tech media, whether that's TechCrunch, VentureBeat, or anything else, it's like a series of success stories. So this company done this amazing thing, they've raised a bunch of money from fantastic people, and then they've raised it again, and everything is fantastic. But yeah, when you're inside, and especially if you're in the CTO chair, things aren't so rosy. So I hope we'll have a good conversation around that. So it would be great if you could, for the benefit of the audience, give a little bit of an intro, talk about yourself a little bit, but also talk about your organizations, how big they are, when you've joined them, and what has been your journey so far. So in an alphabetical order, I'll hand over to Aaron.
I'm always at the front alphabetically.
David, you're on mute,
Hi.
by the way.
Hi. I'm Aaron Robinson, CTO at Primary Bid. I've spent about 30 years working as an IT consultant in financial institutions, mainly in the city of London. Towards the end of that career, it kind of dawned on me that I was working really hard for other people. And so what I really wanted to do was start working hard for myself. And so I started exploring how I could build technology companies myself as an owner. During that time, I met the founders at Primary Bid. I loved what they had to say and what they were doing. And so I joined them. That was January last year, so it's approaching 2 years now. I picked up a team of 5 engineers. We're now 45 people strong, and we've been through a sustained period of hypergrowth during that time. So lots of lessons learned from scaling the team. From a Primary Bid perspective, we've facilitated public access to around about 200 deals now, including IPOs, placings, investment trust blocks. And we now have our first bond running on our platform, which is a great achievement. We've recently launched in France, and we're looking to roll out globally over the next year or two. And so the primary thing that Primary Bid does is to allow public participation in public markets, funny enough. So when a lot of IPOs and placings are made available, they're not made available to the public. So what Primary Bid has done is built a platform through which people can register interest in deals, and as and when they're placed on the platform, they can subscribe to those deals and participate in the same way that institutions can.
I think, Pavel, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, great overview. David, over to you.
Thank you. No, really great to meet you, Pavel, and great to meet you as well, Aaron. Thanks for having me here. Really excited to be here and to learn from the other failures and successes that we've gone around as well. So yeah, I'm David, CTO and one of the co-founders of Marshmallow. We're a leading insurtech. We're on our mission to reduce and one day eliminate the distress caused by accidents and disasters. So over the past 5 years or so, we've been building products to give customers better access to the right level of cover and making that as affordable as possible. So we've now got over 100,000 customers. We've recently completed a successful Series B fundraise that saw us valued at around $1.25 billion. And that's kind of really now given us the financial firepower to go and try and deliver more on our ambitious growth strategy, really. So we're really trying to, at the moment, we're just providing UK motor insurance. We'll be broadening that out early next year. We're also looking to kind of expand a bit more internationally too in the not too distant future. So as for the team size here, we've grown in terms of the whole company to about 200 people fairly recently. Around 45 of those are in engineering currently. We're hiring quite aggressively and we've got a lot of open positions there. As for my background, I've primarily been working sort of leading engineering teams and building lots of back-end and cloud infrastructure systems over the past 12 years or so, primarily in sort of small but growing startups. Had a lot of exposure there to lots of micro failures and some slightly bigger failures. And yeah, I think it was a really good experience to kind of prepare you for. I only wish was as easy as what we were talking about, Pavel, with how it looks on TechCrunch.
Yeah, well, there you go. So David, like if you were to kind of like point out to one challenge that you've been there from day one, and we'll have Matt joining very soon.
Sure.
But if you could just kick things off and like the most I don't know, significant failure or challenge. Hey Matt.
Hey.
We're gonna get to your intro in a sec, but just to kick things off, David, the biggest failure, the biggest challenge, the thing that you look back and you're happy that it's behind you. What's that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to pick out just what's the one because so many come to mind. I think that there's a couple of things that do come to mind. One is, and they don't feel like mistakes or failures or errors at the time. I think it's just like where you find yourself as a company is, particularly in the very early stage, we even found product market fit or even have a single customer. Like you're there building and building away and like not sure exactly like are you building too much? Have you built enough? Like we're ready to go live? And I think like one of my biggest learning from that was you can definitely go live and get active and start getting customers far before you probably think you can. With quite a small team, and we're probably not at that point very technically advanced systems. For sure, there's a lot to then like do after that and play catch up on, and that can be quite an interesting time in terms of feeling a bit chaotic. But I think it's definitely a big learning is that you definitely can go live with things far sooner than you think you can.
Yeah, I think it's something that I definitely want to drill on later on, because I think it's such an interesting challenge with launching any kind of tech product. You obviously realize that it's not what's gonna make you $1 billion business when you launch it, but it's also like it's so arbitrary. There's so little data points on what's enough for the first launch. But yeah, before we dig into that, Matt, great to have you with us today. Well, your company is quite recognized, being around for quite a long time.
I'm Matt. I'm the CTO at What3Words. So I've been here for about 2 years now, which I think I joined right before lockdown hit. So I was kind of on site for 2 months and then immediately kind of like was managing a large remote team and then scaling up everyone remotely and onboarding them for like, it's going to be a couple of months and we'll be back in the office. And that the kind of kind of turned out to be interesting as well. Before that, I was been working at like a number of different sort of startups, traditionally around in the sort of B2B2C space, which is sort of super interesting in itself because you're kind of never sure which B or C you're trying to kind of like please at any given point in time. And then I had a few, I was about 6 years at sort of Google, so working on the sort of big tech thing as well, which has also been good. We talk about failures where like, people in my team get despondent of, oh my God, like we had an outage last night. It's like, yeah, but my friend once managed to take down all of Gmail. Can you beat that?
Awesome. Hi guys. So it looks like Pavel did freeze there, but Matt, thanks for obviously giving us a quick intro there. Yeah, I think Pavel was saying, What3Words is very well known, so I'm sure there's going to be lots of other things that I'm sure you can tell us about. And yeah, David, great to obviously hear a little bit more from you. So yeah, I think one of the key things that Pavel was going to ask, and probably go around the table, Aaron, have you got anything that comes to mind that maybe was your biggest thing, as Pavel would put it, that you want to see in the past now that you don't ever want to revisit as a CTO?
Yeah, just to repeat, David, I think not necessarily the biggest thing, but I'd say a big thing is just making sure you're building the right thing. I mean, there isn't enough engineering resources anyway, and so let's be clear about the value of what we're building in the first place. Let's get good feedback about that early, and not waste time. Basically, would be my biggest learning.
Yeah, of course. And Matt, anything that just instantly springs to mind before I ask a few more questions?
I mean, I think the sort of like the most challenging ones, I think, is again that sort of, I think they sort of like, it's actually striking the balance between, are you building the right thing versus sort of, I think doing the sort of the submarining thing, which tech teams will do sometimes, which is like, give us sort of like 6 to 9 months and we'll rebuild everything and then we'll pop back up again and it'll all be perfect. If you don't have that sort of constant heartbeat from the users or whatever, often you'll end up with a fantastically engineered thing, which sort of, you know, doesn't actually solve the one problem it's supposed to be doing, or you'll find that everything has moved on after that one. So I think I'd actually say it's almost a warning sign in a lot of things. If you're not failing, it probably means you're not pushing stuff fast enough and you're not taking, so it's actually getting the right amount of failure. I think you're like, you know, too much is like, you know, you break everything in sight is bad. Too little and you're actually probably not like moving quickly enough. You're probably not experimenting enough as well.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think actually one common sort of thread there, you guys all mentioned like problem solving. It's such a key part of what you're doing. One question or one area that I would love to explore, you all have products, you're building businesses that, you know, are making things that were previously less accessible more accessible to the entire world, you know, to almost everybody in the world. How much sort of responsibility do you feel as maybe the engineer and, you know, as a tech organization to do right for them? You know, is it always user first? Is it always, Matt, you mentioned lots of feedback. Is that the approach for all of you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like it's constantly on my mind. I think it's on all of our minds. Like we're very, very mission focused. We're super kind of relentless in our prioritization, the way we look at how we're going to best serve our customers. And it means like you have to make some uncomfortable decisions and say no to some things which you might like to do, or, you know, feel like they might be somewhat interesting, but actually when you're looking at what do you think is going to be the best for our customers and for the next stage of our growth, that's like, it can lead to some hard trade-offs, but we're relentlessly focused on that. It's basically the thing that matters most to us.
And how about you, Aaron? Is it sort of, you know, the users, is that always the core mission for the engineering team, always thinking about those?
The customer is always the core. I mean, we have a number of different customers at Primary Bid. We have the public customers, we have the issuers as well. So we have to balance lots of different requirements in order to produce the right solutions for them, for all of them, basically, I would say. I mean, in terms of you know, making the world a better place, which is in the question here, is that at Primary Bid, we're helping to democratize capital markets, which is a pretty cool thing to be doing. There's plenty of that is not available to the public, and it's quite an exciting space to be in.
So when you think about the challenges, you know, you've encountered, let's start from, you know, the sort of the early days, right? So I think, you know, a lot of people in the audience, I assume, you know, think about you know, starting their own businesses, joining early stage company. What's different about early stage? Like you are now, all of you, in companies that scale quite successfully. What's the big shift one has to take into consideration, thinking about like super early stage versus where you guys are now?
I'm happy.
I think with really early stage, you really have to make a mark in the market, and I think you can afford to be a bit looser, or you have to be a bit looser with. I would say in terms of quality, in terms of maybe finding out what the exact market fit is. I mean, part of delivering software is discovering what that market fit is. I think when you become a bit bigger, so the quality is very, very important. Becomes into play much more. That's what I'd say. One of the differences is you get more time on the product market fit as well. I mean, not that much more time, but you get a bit more time, and I think it can be a bit more controlled in terms of what you're delivering.
I think I like the sort of the crossing the chasm approach where you're looking at this as well, which, you know, when you sort of start, you've got like you got the kind of like the initial sort of like, you know, kind of ramp in of the early adopters who like anything new and they're going to jump on everything. They're also going to be sort of super forgiving about any mistakes because they like new shiny things. And they're also like, if you go like, hey, I've got this kind of cool new idea, and they're like, sure, why not? Let's try it. And you can get great feedback from them. You also can kind of get the flip side that I found is that, you know, we certainly had at What3Words and other startups I've been at, you get this early success with your early adopters who instantly get what you're doing. You're like, this is going to be brilliant. Like everyone, like, you know, like we talk to 5 people, you know, and they're the 5 people who answered your calls who, you know, were kind of like, you know, kind of self-selecting, and you go, and then all we need to do now is just roll this out and we're going to be, you know, millionaires. And it's that kind of thing where you kind of like, when you want to start hitting Main Street, when you start having to knock down like particular verticals and then actually getting over like market barriers and things like that. That's where there's like a lot of the challenges. And I think you kind of like, there can be initial sort of euphoria where you start the company, it all looks like it's going to be really simple. You know, you get a lot of like the core of what you're trying to do out there. And then it's actually, you know, the rest of the work is, you know, you might have got the core of the algorithm, you've got the core of the idea and the basis of the business done, but then taking it to market and actually, you know, just kind of like really kind of making it accessible to people. That's, you know, a huge part of the challenge. And it's that when you sort of like, you know, so I think people tend to get excited and then you drop down, you're like, oh God, you know, then we've got knocked back a bunch of times and then you slowly sort of build up. And again, I think it's called like people use it, the bowling alley analogy. Then you just knock down like one vertical at a time and you try and sort of like, you know, just get there and, you know, sort of get out to people.
Yeah, I think that's amazing feedback. David, you want to share your insights?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the difference I would feel at the moment is like in the beginning, particularly prior to even launching a product, obviously it's like difficult at that point to get like real customer feedback. And there's so much more that feels existential at that point in time in the sense of, you know, you've got a certain amount of runway or time to get product market fit and find something to launch. And I think, you know, when you're going through that, I guess the analogy is, you know, at that point you're in the jungle running from tiger, and like, you know, that your time horizon of how you're thinking is basically just like, how do I get away from this tiger? You're not thinking about what's for dinner tonight, or, you know, how am I going to sustainably do this thing later? You're thinking really more about getting the thing ready. And obviously at some point you have to come back and look at that and say, actually, some of these things need to be rethought to scale properly or to take us to the next level. We don't want our teams bogged down in too much technical debt or having to kind of spend too much time on rework or dealing with issues in triage. That is a problem we sometimes deal with, and we're sort of making a lot of good progress on now. But I think, you know, what we really want is motivated people who are dealing with a lot of value creation, who are really just delivering value for our customers and the business. So, like, I think the difference I would see in that very early stage, just because of how existential things are, is you're much more willing to run things like pretty quickly. And obviously that's within the remit of like financial regulation, say, where we are. I'm sure the same for Aaron as well. Which introduces some other challenges too. But yeah, I think that's kind of the primary difference I would take from there.
Great. Yeah, so I think, you know, just to recap, what I think, you know, we were saying about these early stages, that, you know, one should not be worried too much about perfecting the product at that stage. There are always these early adopters who will work with you because they like new things, but you should not get overexcited with their feedback. There's a self-selection aspect. And, you know, David, something you've said, you know, earlier, you can probably launch much earlier than you think you can. These are the 3 things I sort of noted. Any other things you would add before we move into the later stages of the business and the challenges that await there?
Sure, I'd actually maybe just add, like, it isn't something that's changed, so it doesn't point exactly to your first question. I think it's actually something I'm saying is important to really keep, is that is your whole framing of what a failure really is. I think Matt was kind of saying this a few minutes ago, so, you know, not being knocked back by it and actually feeling like, oh, we've got something badly wrong here. I think like it's such a natural part of innovation, exploration, trying to see something new. It's like if you frame that failure as a negative thing, you're basically dooming yourself. Like, I think like what we're trying to, like, part of our values and culture is moving fast and taking ownership. We want people innovating, experimenting, doing things quickly. And I think you're not going to get that if people are seeing failure as a negative thing that's somehow punished or bad. Like, we need to get to a place of like psychological safety, ability to have micro failures, ability to talk widely about those things. And I think if you don't have that, like trying to innovate and move quickly, it's just going to be so hard.
Yeah, it's
I could,
sorry, Karen.
I couldn't agree more with that. It's like it's pretty difficult with the question about your failures. If I look back over the last couple of years and just see the success that Primary has had and how well we've done in engineering, it's pretty difficult to look back on that and find failures. Of course, lots of lessons that you're learning along the way, but categorizing them as failures, it's quite a challenge for me.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting. I think the last 3 startups I've been at have all had in their sort of like, mission, in their sort of values state, they kind of work on. Every single one has had some variation of make new mistakes as a kind of a core value. And I think that's really important because, there's lots of there that's important. Like the new bit is important, but also you should be making mistakes, because if you're not iterating or you're not trying stuff, don't make the same ones again and again. But I think, you need to have the appetite for it. And I think the one thing that's also different again between the early and the late stage stuff, and I think what's interesting about anyone who's been at an early stage startup is the sure, why not kind of attitude. Like lots and lots and lots of people have ideas. Only a very small percentage of those go on and actually try and found their own company, that they've got that kind of confidence or that level of like, why shouldn't someone do this better? And even with What3Words, sometimes people go like, that's a really simple idea. And you're like, yeah, it is. And like, why didn't anyone do it before? It's like, well, no one had that thing of like, sure, why shouldn't we try and change this? Like I've got this idea and now we're actually going to see it through. That I think is the difference. You find that in, pretty much all of the founders that I've worked with as well. I've just got that kind of like, maybe, that drive, but also that kind of, I guess, belief in what they're doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, my co-founder and our CTO, James, always says that, one thing is, about just failing forward attitude. So, we're failing, but we're learning something. And the failure is considered like, like a scientific experiment. Like if you didn't prove your hypothesis, it does not mean that, you lost time. You actually found out something that is important for your next hypothesis and so on and so on. That, I think, we're definitely on board with that. One thing that I believe is important and is also build culture where this view is considered as something, as like a mantra, not only for you as the leaders or founders, but also for the rest of the team. What have worked for you? Because clearly, your organizations have iterated a lot and they are successful. What has worked for you in terms of just injecting this attitude that maybe is not very natural for someone who's not a founder, and a lot of engineering sort of teaching is focused on best practices, clean code, creating things that don't break, etc., rather than maybe pushing things out fast. So I'd be curious to understand how you're shaping your cultures to make this attitude consistent across the whole team.
Yeah, I think this is like a fascinating topic. Honestly, it's one that we spend quite a lot of our time thinking about. Is as we grow and evolve, how can we not lose some of that like hunger from the beginning, or that desire to continue to move quickly and to be able to iterate? And I think a lot of that comes structurally from the way we try to set up our teams. And like when you have small cross-functional teams that can have a lot of locality and decision making, have very clear mission and purpose, and know kind of where they're hitting, all the right skill sets are in the room. I think you can kind of facilitate a lot of that. We can have those local autonomous conversations, make decisions and move quickly as long as they've got really clear mission statements and alignment between what objectives are. So some of that I think we solve kind of structurally. And we just really value giving those teams as much autonomy as possible within certain guardrails, obviously, and making sure the right people are in the room from, say, compliance or from kind of finance to make sure that within those guardrails things are going in the right direction. I think when we think about evolving our values, I listened to a great podcast not long ago actually about how Facebook had the move fast and break things bit and then drop the break things part kind of thing. It was they got to a point of evolving where they realized they were more of like the infrastructure around communications, and like probably the break things piece was not as acceptable at that point in time. They reached a level of maturity where there was a lot at stake if they got those kind of things wrong. And I suppose as you grow and get a little bit bigger and you're servicing more customers, you become more important parts of their life in like a financial sense. But there are some things you maybe have to look at in a slightly different way when it comes to quality and stability and things like that. But broadly speaking, I think we're just trying to really keep for our principles of rapid iteration, talking about our failures a lot as like a leadership team and role modeling that, but all the way through the company, like really encourage everyone to talk about what they've learned, what they got wrong. We even have like a bi-weekly company-wide, like we called it a product failures and learning session, basically, where like each product team talks about the things they got wrong and things that they learned and then what they're getting right. And it's just to kind of normalize talking about constant experimentation.
About giving confidence to the people as well is that we get new joiners that come in with relatively little experience who don't feel confident to try something out, and encouraging them to do that. But we get this from equally experienced people that come in from corporates in particular, who are just not used to being in a world where you can try things and fail. And so it's in a startup world, this is one of the great things about being there, is that you can afford to experiment a bit more and learn from that rather than being too tightly controlled.
Yeah, well, just to drill into that, Aaron, a little bit. So when you work with these people who come from, bigger, more stable organizations, but I think, in your area of the world, it's probably, that what you're doing, quite a lot of people were on the bigger companies side. How do you make them shift their attitude? Like, how do you support people to change the way they work and how they approach making mistakes and trying out new things and increased ownership?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing we do when new joiners arrive is that we'll place them as an engineer in a product team. So no matter their level of experience, they could come in as a very senior person. They need to understand how Primary Bid works, how our processes work, the architecture. And the best way they can do that is to start coding and experiencing what we do and the way that we work. So that's one way in which we can ease them into the process, particularly if they come from a much more structured and flexible setup.
Yeah, great. Matt, any thoughts on that based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, I think, as leaders, I think there is a sort of a lot of subtlety around, I guess, how you when you have when how you present the stuff and how you contextualize it and how you talk about it with people. Because again, going into if something has gone down, then it's like, okay, what did we learn? What was the context of our decision? Would we have changed anything? Obviously we've got new information now, but would we broadly, did this make sense at the time or not? And again, also just working with the rest of the company to something I think people like having good communications around this as a company. We say, look, you hold your hands up and said we tried to push the thing, it didn't work, or this had an outage, there was whatever the thing was, just being really clear, taking ownership of it, and just being quite factual about it as well. And then when you're pushing down, talking to people, again, it's sort of being less of a kind of there's a difference between an accountability culture and a blame culture and things like that. And I think you basically, if you sort of set the tone in terms of how you talk about things yourself as a leader, and also how you talk to the people who work for you, you sort of set the expectations. I think people generally end up following that as well.
Yeah, great. And guys, the sort of say opposite angle of that direction is one of the sort of fundamental truth about startups, as it's repeated, it's focus. So how do you balance giving your teams an opportunity to experiment, have ownership, try new things, why not attitude, with the fact that you need to be relentlessly focused? There are a bunch of very aggressive VCs looking at you. There are probably a lot of people that are not tech, who have their own priorities in sales or other areas of business, who put the pressure on you to hit those metrics, to help them launch products, etc., etc. I think as you scale, that becomes an entirely new challenge, because in the early stage we discussed, it's all about creating something, launching it, experimenting, and finding a bit of attraction. But as you later in this stage, how do you balance these new dimensions?
I think for us, we've had a mixture of what I would consider successes around how we've tried to continue to encourage innovation and give autonomy and freedom, and try to kind of cultivate that experimentation mindset. Part of it has been the more maybe traditional, we can run some hackathons, and actually we've had some pretty successful things out of that, initiatives that have actually grown into really big kind of things. For example, a fraud model that was built in just a couple of days that now really forms a key part of our core fraud prevention detection strategy. It's grown out to have its own team around it now, and it's really, really important to us. And that literally was built over a couple of days by 5 or 6 really sort of invested in smart people who kind of really figured out they could build something meaningful there. But I think more broadly than that, we're trying to be really not very top down in terms of actually setting the what of what teams are doing. We're really trying to be clear about where we're trying to head in our objectives and what our strategy is, and try to create as high alignment as we possibly can and give teams, top level objectives to work towards. We go through like a planning cycle where teams themselves like document and write up the opportunities they think they can pursue are and how they think they can get to these goals. So I'm kind of hopeful through that process that's giving them that constant kind of feedback loop of like experimentation, looking at what the opportunity space is, shifting focus if it makes sense to do so. Like, of course, they play that back to the leadership team and stuff, say that here's what we're thinking of doing. Are we kind of in agreement with it? And there can be like a two-way dialogue there, but a lot of it is very kind of bottom-up driven of like the what of what we're actually going to do to try to get to this goal, which I think can hopefully really encourage quite a lot of experimentation mindset within the team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, it's one of the things probably like into what we'll be talking about later, but I think as a CTO, I think lots of people initially think about the CTO being like the technical lead of the organization and sort of managing like down and through the team. Like about half the job at least is also just being the representation of the tech team and kind of representing the tech team at a wider level of the company. And realistically, what the tech team also want you to do is just have a very high level understanding of like, the priority for the next quarter will be like trust or verification or, third party businesses or channel sales. And then all you need to do is give them that, like, if you can get that theme from the rest of the business of like roughly where should we be focusing and then pass it on at a high level to the tech team. Normally, again, if you're giving them enough autonomy, they'll go like, oh, well, actually, we could do this. They want a little bit of context. They need the context of the business of what you can do as a CTO. And then often you can, again, if you have a good team and you've structured it well, you can give some fairly sort of high level, like something in this direction of like third party support or, whatever it is, or actually we need to work on our B2C side this quarter. And then people will actually sort of like be able to push up ideas as much as stuff coming down through as well. And again, being less prescriptive about the how as well. People tend to get very like deterministic about how you should be building stuff. And if you can be quite results and goal orientated, then they can really surprise you in how they'll get there.
You have to find the right balance there. But just going back to the original question, is that it really does depend on the project that people are on. If you're working on something regulatory, there's less room for experimentation there. But I think it's easy to lose sight of what engineering's role is. Ultimately, we're here to serve value to the business. And one part of that is actually understanding technology. So you need to give the engineers time to experiment on new things so they can best deliver solutions for the business in a more efficient way or a faster way, whatever that is. So you have to allow that experimentation as part of the normal allocation of time.
Yeah, great section, guys. I think that's one of the challenges that I think a lot of companies are going through, and it's not very easy. And one challenge that I believe a lot of organizations were going through in the last year and a bit was how to combine this transformation that you were talking about. So you were all talking about like a strong sense of very particular culture and attitude. How to achieve that when on one hand your organization is growing quite fast and you stop being in one physical location? Like, what's your take on remote work? What's your take on how what you've just shared can transpire in an environment where people are maybe not necessarily working from the same location? I'd be very curious to hear about your experiences. So how you handled the situation when it was impossible to work from one location, but also what you've done after, whether you came back to an office, whether you have some kind of hybrid, and what are the challenges and opportunities you see in this big shift that is taking place.
So I'm happy to go first. So in the engineering team at Primary Bid, we're remote first. But we actually began remote first before COVID started. So actually we were pretty well prepared by the time COVID came in. And ultimately we ended up taking advantage of it. So when we were looking for candidates, we were exploring all over the UK, Northern Ireland, Scotland, but wherever. It didn't really matter where they were, because now we can choose from the best engineers around the country. So this was really beneficial to us. Now that our office is opened, we encourage engineers to come into the office, but we don't force it. It's an optional thing. We have regular sessions, regular workshops, or just get-togethers sometimes of the engineers, just to bring people together. It's really valuable to get people sitting in the same space, not just with engineering, but also outside engineering as well. This is a really valuable thing to do. But I think, you know, remote's here to stay. It's not going away. I think it's definitely going to become a more of a hybrid thing. But embracing remote, why wouldn't you? I mean, look at the talent you have available throughout the world. I mean, it's only through, you know, regulatory and tax restrictions that we can't employ from a wider group of people. But I think it's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I think so. Two elements. Like one about what's the challenges been as we've gone through like scaling quite quickly as we've been remote, and you know, culturally how's that affected us? I think, you know, just prior to COVID, we were about 35 people in one office. That was the whole company size, not just engineering. And I think, you know, over that sort of 18-month period, we sort of grew to about 200 people overall, probably about 45 in engineering at that point. Most are obviously being done, you know, fully remotely through the various lockdowns, and that was tough. You know, like culturally speaking, I think there was a lot of focus in the company on like how are we going to do this as we grow this much, and how we can kind of really get a sense of how our culture is evolving, changing, how new people kind of adding to our culture, how can we like preserve the things that we really highly value. And I think, you know, it'd be live to say that was an easy thing. Like it was a constant challenge with a lot of thought about how we can try and work together to do that, and, you know, make our onboarding process as clear as possible, talk very clearly about what mattered to us and why, just sort of really try to role model the values that we wanted to live, and actually behave in a way that doesn't just put those values up on a board somewhere and print them out and say that's what we value. It's kind of, you know, really living it through the day-to-day experiences, like how we hire, how we promote, what decisions we're making. All of that was kind of like how we tried to embed our culture more deeply. So we're actually very authentic by what we're trying to live every day. I think as for like the remote piece, so like we've embraced it too. We've got kind of two models at the moment. One is for people that are happy to be kind of hybrid workers who come in maybe a couple of days a week or sometimes less. But we're getting more flexible on that as we go. And some people really like that. For the more collaborative people, they really enjoy coming to the office. So again, they're not forced to, they have the option to do that. And on the other side of it, we do have fully remote people as well. So we have people based all around the UK, we have people based out in Europe. And we are, you know, looking to open a second hub in the not too distant future as well, where we're hoping to have quite a point of presence in Europe.
Matt?
Yeah, so we went from being sort of almost entirely on site with sort of occasional remote work to fully remote, which was interesting. And again, I think probably like Aaron and David, we had a lot of growth during lockdown as well, which is a nice problem to have. I think the biggest challenge was something I was aware of was onboarding people remotely. And honestly, I think the feedback I had from everyone who had joined this, if it was the first time they had joined a company remotely, was they just said it's really weird. And it was like, so it's actually finding, you know, so it was okay for me, it was like, you know, want to make sure they were feeling comfortable and onboarded. But for them, they just said, this is the oddest thing. Like I've been at this company now for a year and I haven't met anyone face to face yet. And it's a sort of understanding, I guess, trying to have the empathy and the understanding for what those challenges those people were having coming on boarding. And I think it was slower to bring people up because the overall difficulty with when you go fully remote is the extra overhead you have on communication, that's a big thing, particularly for people when they start. Because normally if you just had a question, you look over and you see someone isn't busy, so you can ask them a question. But then if you try and like jump on a VC with them, you're really kind of nervous that you're interrupting them. You don't have the idea of like, it's now time, even just like dropping a Slack message, you feel like you're interrupting someone much more than you would just going like, oh, look, they're free and I can grab them. So I think it was like really just reinforcing with people in the team, like, you know, make sure you take time to actually reach out and set up time to onboard the new people. And for the new people saying, look, there's nothing more important that anyone in the company can do than helping you get up to speed at the moment. So don't be afraid to set up a Zoom call with them to ask questions. You know, we're all here to help you. And it's sort of trying to sort of take some of the weirdness and some of the stiltness out of it. And I still find that a little bit like where you're feeling, oh God, it feels like these two teams are maybe not aligning, or like, you know, might be sort of like not communicating enough. The instinct you kind of have to avoid is going like, well, let's just have a standing meeting once a week, because you can easily then just fill everyone's calendar. The solution to everything might be, let's have a front-end back-end meeting, let's have a front-end UX meeting, and then, you know, everyone's calendars are full. So like the answer to everything isn't just like having more standing meetings, but making sure you're getting that kind of ad hoc kind of communication going through still. And I think it's, again, just being super flexible with, you know, all the tools that you can have available as well.
I think what we're discovering as well is that, I mean, this is obvious, but some people need more attention than others, and in particular, you know, if people are new to the business, if you're, you know, a grad coming into technology for the first time, you need more one-to-one time, or you need more face time with people to be able to get to grips, because there's a lot to learn. But the second thing is that we're discovering as well is that there's a lot of focus on people talking about onboarding. And what we're realizing is it's more than about onboarding. It's more about maintenance of the people as you're going along as well, and the maintenance of that relationship. And it does ultimately, as Matt's saying, it results in just more communication between people, which you take for granted when you're in the office.
Yeah, I think we as a business, as Tech3, we started in February last year, and we're now 15 people. I think 7 or 8 in the tech team. There's some of them I've never met, but that's gonna change next week. But I think one of the things I enjoyed, because you've covered I think a lot of really great challenges. One of the things I enjoyed in this change landscape is that people who love the problem you're solving or the product you're building can be anywhere in, say, Europe, and you can benefit from that, because they will, if you have kind of like a way to distribute information about what you're building, etc., they're gonna come from so many surprising angles, and you're not forced to compete, for example, for London-based engineers with pretty much everyone, which I think made this space fairly mercenary, because like even if you're a super well-funded $1 billion plus Series B business, you can on one hand hire people from very successful Series A companies, but you probably have people from, say, Google, Facebook, etc., not sending message to pretty much every single developer you're hiring. So how do you, because you've all went through an interesting period of growth, but if you're going to continue to be as successful as you are, you're also planning for the next 12, 18 months, which is probably doubling or tripling your engineering team. So how do you think about that? Because the world has changed a little bit, the organizations have changed. How do you make sure you'll be attractive for people? How do you make sure you will be able to keep the people that are core of the team? What are your thoughts on on what future brings, and the challenges there?
So I mean, in terms of keeping people, it comes down to communication. You need to be talking to. I talk to everyone in my team, all 45 on a kind of semi-regular basis. It's really important to get feedback and see how happy or unhappy people are. If they're unhappy, deal with it quite quickly. And I think how you grow that team going forward is something we're looking at right now. But what I would say is one of the most important things is getting those first hires right, because the future people that you hire are going to be in the mold of those people that you get in. So invest time in getting the right people in at the start, and that'll pay dividends, I think.
Yeah, great point.
I agree with a lot of that. I kind of think as well, for me, it's about actually trying to promote the environment we're quite proud of creating, really. I mean, we're lucky to work with fantastic people. I think we've by a lot of luck and some judgment, we've hired a fantastic team. And I think, people probably do want to just come and work with smart, ambitious people who are driven by what they're doing, get a lot of autonomy, and actually working towards like lofty goals, in a sense, in terms of our mission to reduce and eliminate the distress caused by accidents and disasters. It's like a pretty big long-term goal. It might not quite sound as sexy as, say, SpaceX's mission or something like that, but it's meaningful in a sense, right? Like society, it creates meaningful value for society to not have to go through that level of distress when those things happen. If we can find ways of preventing and improving the experience they go through there, that is like meaningful work. It gives you social purpose. I think if you're coupling that with working with smart people who have a lot of autonomy, and you actually get to kind of learn a lot in the environment you're in, you're bettering yourselves, you've got a lot of meaningful work to do, and you can drive a lot of that and have some level of flexibility around it, like the remote work we've spoken about, and like the sort of working patterns we have. And of course, it's there as well, which is about, as you pointed to at the beginning, compensation. You need to make sure that's fair, and it's where the market is, and that you're treating people fairly and equally there, and you're not taking advantage of them. It's I think that's just a baseline. You have to be doing that. It might not be that you can compete with, say, the Facebooks and Googles of the world, who just have the extremely large checkbooks, but not everybody wants to be in those environments either. That might be a different demographic.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is just attracting the people who are kind of like going to fit in anyway. In the sense of like, because I worked at Google for 6 years, and by the end I was bored senseless. Because you literally they hire the smartest people in the world and get people to click on more ads, and it's utterly unfulfilling for a lot of people. And some people, yeah, if you just want to earn a lot of money and that's fine, you can kind of go there. But I kind of like left, and I love the startup, and I'm kind of here now. I think everyone there's a book by Daniel Pink on motivation, which is great for this. And really the 3 things for anyone to be all sort of motivated and engaged in their job is really simple. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So the autonomy, they've got the space to do what they want to do. And the mastery is they feel like they've got a thing they're going to learn and grow in that environment. And the purpose, they're engaged, they believe that what they're doing matters. And again, I think for all 3 of our companies, we have that. And I think we engage, I found that for our company, we can say I've never worked at a company where you come in and you find out that you've helped rescue 3 people off Snowdonia over the weekend. That's kind of interesting, and it's different. And for both the other companies have that same thing as well. And it's also about getting the feeling that there's a place that they will grow and learn things, and that they'll be able to kind of make their own decisions and things like that. And that's the people we want to attract as well.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to taking advantage of being a startup. Like you can do things that the bigger corps can that you might be competing with in terms of packages and things like that. There's lots that you can do and lots of freedom that comes from being in a startup.
Yeah, and I found the autonomy to be really motivating. I mean, the first time I was ever in a startup, I was came there and I was like, oh my god, so we had a big problem. We needed to hire some computer vision researchers, and I looked at this, and eventually I went to the founders and went, I think we need to do this, and we need to hire some more people. And they looked at me blankly and they went, Matt, you're the CTO. You tell us, do we need these people? And I'm like, yes, we do. And it was like, oh wow, I can just, I'm going to be I'm going to be trusted to do things, and I'm going to be able to run this team and build it like I want to do. And that was hugely motivating for me personally. And then just the other 2 are nodding their heads at that as well. So
yeah, well, we'll get to a bit of a personal question about your role at the end and how it's evolving. And how it's maybe different to the other roles you've had. But one more thing that strikes me is that you are on a new mat. When you were talking about being attractive, you both mentioned that your organizations are doing things that are making something possible that wasn't possible. So kind of like some mission. So in the primary bid case, amazing an institutional asset to be available for say ordinary people. You've mentioned sort of saving people's lives, and you've mentioned a bunch of other things that you try to communicate to these people. How do you what's your organizations are, when they're successful, every VC business is extremely talent hungry. How do you make sure that sort of people hear you? How do you make sure that you're because it's a different thing to grow twice when you're 5 engineers to 10. It's a different thing to grow from 45 engineers to 90 or 100, and it's a different thing to grow from 100 to 200. And as we see, it's not uncommon that these kind of transformations are happening within 12 months. So how do you make sure that you are attractive to talent? What's the best way to, if there are people who are on the audience and they are interested to solve challenges that you're working on, how do you reach them?
Do you do CTO panels like this?
Sorry?
You do CTO panels like this?
Yeah, well, one way, definitely. We're happy to help with that. But I'm sure it's not enough as much as I believe in its power.
I know the question wasn't specifically directed at me, but I kind of wanted to add, part of what motivates us is a lot of underserved segments in insurance. I think, for example, where we started with migrants, they would typically charge about 51% more for their insurance for no other reason than being basically born abroad. And we found lots more examples like that. So the Independent released an article earlier this year that said that 1 in 5 adults in the UK have less than £100 to fall back on in their bank accounts. And for us, that really just highlights the importance of making affordable financial products and driving the cost of insurance down. And I think a lot of the incumbents haven't been doing that. They've been making record profits over COVID. They've over years and years haven't really been product centric, haven't really been thinking about how to actually use technology and do the best things for users and customers. For us, they're the kind of things that drive us, right? It's the solving the distress people feel when they get into accidents, have some kind of trauma in their life, whether that be in their car or elsewhere. And how can we get that mission statement out there and kind of sell that to the world around us? I think it's a huge problem, one of kind of employer brand and the competitive market we're in. And yeah, I agree with Aaron. You try and engage through forums like this, but I think there's a lot more we need to do to be active with communities as well, to kind of talk about the good that we're doing, how ambitious we think our mission is, and we're just keen to get that message out there and try and kind of show people through, like, give people a window into our world and show them that there's interesting work going on here.
Yeah. And you've mentioned also things like hackathons, etc. Is it the kind of thing that you continue to do, or publishing some engineering content, mentoring, stuff like that? Are these the kind of things that you would do typically to share this message, to sort of differentiate yourself from essentially like hundreds of other companies that are 5, 6, 10 years old and are solving important problems? Because let's be honest, like this space is super crowded, and it's definitely the developers have choice where they want to go.
I think it's fair. It's super competitive, isn't it? I think giving people the kind of, we've spoken a lot about autonomy, but I think like the environment where they can learn, they can iterate, they can make mistakes, they're going to work with amazing people around them. And I think also like through that lens as well, being able to come and actually see and have the impact. I think Matt was talking about how maybe at Google, I think Aaron said as well earlier, like sometimes in organizations, like the sort of momentum you can get is just so slow and painful. And I think some people want that kind of fast feedback loop of like, I'm going to come in, have an impact and see what I'm doing. I'm actually making an impact. My team's making an impact. We feel really driven. We've got a lot of purpose. And I think, if you can show people that that's the environment you can offer, I think that's attractive for a lot of people. That might not be the case in every startup or every big corp. It can feel like you're sort of bashing your head against the wall with a lot of red tape. I think we work hard to not.
I think also putting your money where your mouth is. There's a lot of talk about the good that you can do. Taking part in schemes that are going to be helping other people to get back into industry. So we're taking part in the Women's Returner program, which is a really good initiative to help people to get back into work that have been off for a period of time, that have got great technical skills, but perhaps just a little bit out of touch with the latest tech. So doing things like that is really helpful. Of course, it gets exposure as well. And at the mentoring side, we have people within Primary Bid as well that are joining mentoring schemes, and we encourage it as well.
Yeah, great, guys. One last question, and let's try to wrap things up. Keep the responses in like 30 seconds. But one of the things that always strikes me is that when you're in a tech business, it's not just the tech business that is growing, but it's also you as a kind of like a human being. Like, what was the most important lesson for every one of you between being like an engineer and moving into sort of founder and like a CTO spot, and what was like most surprising finding, like what you had to change, what was maybe the most important transformation in thinking that you had to do? And maybe start with Aaron and move alphabetically.
I think the biggest transformation for me is not being able to code every day. That's probably the biggest transformation and the hardest thing. Eventually, you just need to let go. And as Matt was saying right at the beginning, is that you just need to have a higher level perception of literally everything that's going on. This is one of the biggest transitions. I mean, yeah.
David?
Yeah, I think the concept switching is definitely a big one. Sort of compartmentalizing. I think so. For me, it was probably like just keep listening to the people around you, the smart people you've hired who have the context, who know what's going on. Like, listen to them and make sure you're taking their input very seriously, making sure that they've got the autonomy to do the right things. But I think also when you're doing that as well, just kind of making sure that you're open about your own like transparent about your own limitations and things you need to learn and improve at, and get help from the people around. You're not going to get everything right. You don't have all the answers. That's why you've hired all these smart people. And I think it's just important to make sure you're in an environment where, you know, their voices are heard and they're able to do the right things.
Yeah, great. Matt?
Yeah, I'd echo what both people have said, Aaron and David. It was a change to suddenly be covering such a breadth of stuff that you suddenly have to, and then working at like a higher level where you have this sort of oversight onto everything that's going on, but not a deep knowledge. And then, you know, it's sort of like ideally what you do, again, you hire smart people and sort of get out of their way as much as possible. But it's like enabling, you know, just knowing what you can do to enable your team, and then sort of taking ownership for everything that goes on there. And again, it's working, you know, just having the right people in place to do that.
Full loop back to the trust thing, as David's pointing out there. Get the right people in place.
Yeah. Look, guys, it's been great to talk, and you know, it feels like it could easily lasted 45 minutes more. I think we had over 70 people joining the talk. I hope that they're gonna, you know, reach out, being super interested in speaking to you. Thanks a lot once again. We've also one of the things we're going to be launching very soon on Tech3, which is going to give you more opportunities to share your stories, is an F-1 series, which is Founder -1, where we speak with CTOs who very often don't get the spotlight they deserve, to actually talk about, you know, their stories, their challenges, etc., and, you know, give engineers access to not just information about, you know, what you are doing at the moment or how much money the company raised, but also about your journey from an engineer to a technical co-founder or a CTO, and, you know, learning firsthand from you, because there's so little content like that available there. So we would love to host you there as well. Thanks a lot, and I guess Samuel, you're gonna kick us out.
Hi guys, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that talk. Yeah, like Pavel said, I'm sure we could have gone all day because it was so interesting. Just want to say, I guess we can give a big sort of virtual round of applause, because it was really amazing to get insight to all three of your stories. Pavel, as always, thank you so much. And yeah, guys, I'll let you leave the stage. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Great to meet you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.